afternoon. I'm Heather Hughes, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us today for our Partnering for Success webinar series. Today, we will be discussing IT security. Don't forget to lock the doors. We will be recording today's webinar and distributing to each of you. As we progress through the presentation, please feel free to put any questions, comments you may have in the chat box. We will answer these questions as they're submitted. Our presenter today is Public Entity Partners' very own David Fielder. David is a project analyst for Public Entity Partners, where he oversees IT projects and IT security. David previously held positions in New York City as a computer forensic investigator, security specialist at Kroll and Aurora Information Security and Risk. During this time, he assisted in securing organizations such as the American Museum of Natural History, Lee Natures, Inc., and 3 presidential candidates. David also assisted in the forensic investigation of City of San Diego's audit, the Target breach, Sony PlayStation breach, TJ Maxx breach, and the Enron and WorldCom bankruptcies. He has been a longtime resident of Middle Tennessee and a graduate of David Lipscomb University. So without further ado, I give you David.
Thank you, Heather. I want to thank each of you for taking time to learn a little bit more about cybersecurity this afternoon. I understand that the audience for this webinar will be made up of our risk managers and not necessarily IT staff. So forgive me if I oversimplify some of these items. At Public Entity, we work hard to educate members on risks that they face so that they can avoid having to file claims. My goal today is for this webinar to enlighten members on the computer risks they face and how to mitigate that risk. Matthew Marshall, who was at our loss control department in East Tennessee, pointed out at the symposium, the largest hurdle for members to overcome is money, knowledge, and time. I tried to incorporate that into the talk I have today. We're going to monitoring, training, and a cyber incident response plan. We'll also touch on policies just to make everyone aware of that need. Nothing's been as much of a threat to computing business as ransomware. No one has been able to hold an entire business ransom. We've had hackers and malware viruses for most of the years of computing, but it was not really for money, it was just for show. Ransomware monetizes poor security and is highly lucrative and with little effort and almost no risk. And that has brought some big players. Our world has changed, and with it, our culture must change. We used to leave cars unlocked in parking lots and driveways. Not anymore. We have to lock it. Our computer world has changed, and so must our computer culture. So what is ransomware? Ransomware is the monetizing of poor security to start with. Ransomware starts with malware being installed on a computer. Malware is really no different than a virus that we've known in the past. It gets on a computer, it manipulates that computer to do something that the user doesn't want it to do and usually has a negative impact. The malware will then start to manipulate the computer. It will make changes to the computer. It will try to contact the person who wrote the malware or tried to load it. It will try to give them access to the system. It will try to give them passwords that it can capture. It will look to see what any information it can find. It will also try to find ways to move to other systems. The idea is just to get in the system somehow. The intruder ultimately is looking for an administrative password to the servers. And with that password, the intruder will load an encryption program and run it on the servers. Finally, a ransom note is left explaining what must be done to recover the data. Sometimes that will be sent in an email. This is a very brief of the anatomy of a ransomware attack. The key point is the ransomware starts with malware getting installed on a computer. How does that get installed? Well, traditionally, servers and workstations that were on the internet that were not patched or their software was out of date were easy targets. So the call centers would scan the internet, IP address. They would try to push through vulnerabilities that they knew would exist on older machines, hoping that someone hadn't patched the machine. Then we started seeing passwords cracking. And I've done password cracking in my past. What's happening now is we're starting to see other servers that have been hacked. They will take the password list and the username and passwords and publish them. People will grab those lists and run them against other services and computers to see. As I was stating, traditionally servers and workstations on the internet were targets. They were usually outdated, not patched, and so they were easy targets for known vulnerabilities. Passwords are the next easy target because many of them were easy to guess, and a lot of them had been used on other servers and other systems that had been hacked, and they would try to use those same credentials. So we've gone over servers and passwords, and the next most popular way to get malware installed on a computer is with an email, tricking the user to clicking a link or an attachment. This is often called phishing, social engineering. There's another form I want to briefly mention called spear phishing, where someone actually does research on the web page to say who this person's boss is, and then they try to mimic an email address from that. So that's a new thing that's sort of come up in the last couple of years. How do we protect against cyber attacks? Well, we have network monitoring. It's where we watch the network to look for activity that's happening there. We have employee training, which is crucial. We have policies that help us build a structure for our IT security and give us the opportunity to contemplate on some of these things deeply. And then we have a cyber incident response plan for when we do have an incident and we can control it. Network monitoring. Anti-malware service is probably one of the greatest things that you can do. This is basically a virus scanner, anti-malware, malware scanner, all that. I put in here anti-malware service because this company, CIS, who is part of Homeland Security, offers a product that you can have on your computer that will monitor for malware and will notify someone in New York if it's happening. They're watching it 24/7. They will call you if they see something on your computer. If they see it start to spread, they have the ability to turn those computers off immediately. This is a huge service. This will impact a cyber attack at many levels. Next, we have an inventory system and update systems of software. As we said before, software updates are crucial because these vulnerabilities are what the hackers are using to manipulate and get around in the machine. So if a machine is up to date on its patches, they won't find these things. Again, I'll tell people it's like walking through a parking lot at night. If the door is locked, they move on. Next is malicious domain blocking and reporting. This is in case a user accidentally does click a link in a web page and the link is to a bad site. This malicious domain blocking will prevent that from going through. That service is free from that organization, MSISAC. These three work after training your user. If your user does screw up, because the beauty of email is you've got human error on your side. They're going to wait for you to mess up and click the wrong thing. These three things can stop that, even if that happens. Employee training. Training should be frequent and on relevant topics. You should consider online security awareness training also. KnowBe4 has some free content that you can use to train your staff. Password or passphrase. We've talked about the problem with passwords being easy to guess and being on other systems that have been hacked. But I tell you, a passphrase is as easy to remember as a password. If I use my childhood dog's name, it has 7 characters in it, and I have to remember that name. If I remember one of my favorite movies, the title to it, it's no harder to remember that, and it has 16 characters in it. That is tremendously hard for a password cracker to work on. Think before you click. Think before you click is teaching users that they cannot trust email the way they may have in the past, and how to spot phishing messages. I know people that used to leave the doors open on their car at night in the driveway, and they've had people go through them. They now have to lock their doors. Email is not a secured communication path anymore. You don't really know who's on the other end of the email that you've been sent or who is receiving it. Unexpected emails with links and attachments or requests for someone you don't actually work with, these are suspect. You need to train your employees that if they get an email that's out of the ordinary asking for something, not just telling you something, but asking for something with links and attachments, to be suspect. It's kind of like when I go to my mailbox at the end of the day and I take out my mail and I see things addressed to me. I immediately look at the return address to see where they're from and decide if I need to put them in the trash without even opening them. Sense of urgency. Every con out there has a sense of urgency because they want you to make an emotional decision and not a logical one. Sometimes an email just doesn't look right. A lot of times the bad actors are from other countries who don't understand our language and the syntax of our language, and they'll compose an email that may have errors in it or not look right. Perhaps the subject doesn't match the body. That's a suspect email. Do not go and look at that. Always, always, always confirm phone call if it is a monetary transaction. We have had several cases in my past where people have transferred large sums of money because someone sent an email or a text message, only to find out that was not the person. If you're dealing with money, pick up the phone and call the person and say, hey, I got your email for this. Do you want me to put it through? I'm just checking. If you're not sure on any email, call them. If it's urgent, they're probably not going to send an email. They're probably going to call you. If it's important to them, they won't mind you calling to verify. Policies. There are several policies that you probably should think about. An acceptable use policy. This explains to users what the computers are for and what they're expected to be used for and what they're not expected to be used for. Checking personal email on the computer may or may not be something your organization wants to allow. It does open the door to more malware possibly being loaded on a computer, so that may be something you would put in there. An enforcement policy. How are we going to enforce some of the policies that we have? Are you going to have software, hardware that's going to do this? Are you going to have penalties for if someone does break the rule? That's an enforcement policy. A monitoring policy. Letting employees know how computers are being monitored and what information is going to be saved and what's going to be used in certain situations. A monitoring policy is a good one to have. Physical access policy. This is who has access to the building after hours, what floors you have access to, and what areas. Education policy. This is a policy where the corporation decides we're going to make a commitment to educate our employees on computer security so that we can eliminate the human error, which is the biggest risk. Cyber incident response plan was the last thing we were going to talk about. Document and plan for damage control. So if you know you're probably going to have to deal with this sooner or later. So you need to have a plan for how to deal with the damage. How are you going to handle this? Some people say turn the computer off that's affected. Some people say shut it down. Most say disconnect it from the network. Pull the cable out of the back of it. Document how the incident will be resolved. whether it's one machine or an entire data center, what would be our attack plan? How are we going to handle it? We're going to have backups when we have to recover from it. That would be the plan of recovery. How are you going to get your data back? How are you going to get back on your feet? What are you going to do in the meantime? Document the roles of the incident responder team. These are people that have been selected to handle certain situations, and document their role. Document who will do which task during these incidents. Who's going to be responsible for imaging machinery? Who's going to be responsible for monitoring other machinery and running malware scanners on these machines to be sure that it's not spreading? Most of all, detail how the incident will be documented. When you have these incidents, you need someone who is the center of information, who is documenting what's happening, because in the heat of the moment, you're not going to remember everything that happened. And when your forensic team shows up, they're going to have to understand what you've done and what you haven't, who's touched what machines, what modifications have been done to them in that time. It's also good to go back and look and say, hey, here's what we did and here's how we could improve it. It's good to show to your insurance company how you were handling the situation. What do I do when I have an incident? Some say it's not if, it's when. Hopefully it is if, not when. The first thing that's going to happen is someone's going to get in. There will be a security breach. Someone's going to get in. They're going to be running code, virus, malware on machines until it is noticed. Once the security breach is detected, you start your plan. The incident response team is engaged. The incident response plan is followed. Senior management needs to be informed of the breach and how it's being handled. The cyber insurance company should be contacted. They will bring in an incident response broker or computer forensic specialist. You'll have to think about how you're going to communicate to your customers what has happened. It's maybe a good time to bring in your lawyer. By having a lawyer handle this, you have client privilege confidentiality. The incident plan broker team will work to resolve the incident according to your incident response plan. That pretty much concludes the brief overview of what we were talking about today. And don't forget to lock the doors. Our environmental risks have changed, and now our culture must change to combat the threats. I'll leave you with 3 websites. The security, CIS, they have an unbelievable amount of material out there that is free for municipalities due to Homeland Security. There is an abundance of information there. That would be the first thing to go after. Training. Know4 has some free sites, free information on their site. They are the quintessential online training for this kind of activity. Policies. The SANS Institute has a lot of free information. They have here information on security policies. There's a whole list of security policies that you can look through and choose. Oh, policies as in security policies, not insurance policies. So, and that concludes it. I hope this has been helpful to you. We have lots of information for you, and many more websites that we can disseminate to you after this.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. We greatly apologize for all the technical issues, but I think we got through those finally and got through the program. Our next Partnering for Success webinar will be held on November 9th when we will present Working with Media. Visit our website to register for this webinar or contact me for further information. And if there are any questions, we do have time for questions. You could just type those in the chat box or in the Q&A. Not seeing any questions. Does CIS have a blanket IR plan to use, incident response plan?
They do not, but they have services that can help you build that. That blanket plan would be based on your organization. They service all industries in the U.S., whether it's power plants or financial institutions. Being a municipality, we happen to get their services for free. So they will have templates out there that you can look through.
Are there any other questions? Any and all questions welcome. What about a VPN?
A VPN, as in a virtual private network, they are useful for if you are working out in the field and you want to connect back to the town hall and be on their secured network.
Or work from home.
Or work from home, work from a hotel. They are very useful at isolating your information and insulating you from the activity that's on the internet. That's a very good thing to have.
How does that protect you?
A lot of times if you go to hotels, someone can set up a wireless point and say, hotel's wireless. People will connect to it thinking it's the hotels, and it's not. They will be sniffing packets off of that and trying to get passwords and information. But by using a VPN, all that information is channeled to your city hall and is encrypted, so it is blind to them as to what it is.
So if you click on a malicious wireless network, that will protect you?
Yes.
Any other questions? Any particular concerns with SCADA?
Yes, that is a critical area, and there is a bill passed at the Capitol that says that by the end of the year, you've got to have a plan for that, and we're working with some cities on that.
Could you tell people what that is that don't know?
SCADA, I wish I could remember all the acronym for that. That's basically utilities and systems that operate the equipment. I know I worked at Smyrna, we had that at the wastewater treatment plant, water treatment plant. I think the gas company may have had some of those. So SCADA, the big thing to know about SCADA is it is so important, it needs to be off of the internet. There needs to be an air gap between the internet and the network that your SCADA is running on. And that's one of the things we're going to try to push for. Sometimes that's not possible, but there are ways to isolate that network as much as possible.
So are there any particular concerns about it?
Well, yeah, the problem with SCADA is if someone hacks it, they can actually operate machinery and do things. So air gapping it, meaning no connection, is one of the best ways to do that. But a lot of times you find you have to have some connection, so you have a real restricted connection from the internet to that.
Any other questions? I think we're getting into the good information here.
Yeah.
Well, if you do have questions, you may email them to me at heatherhughes@pepartners.org, and we'll work to get those questions answered. However, we would encourage you to register for our next webinar, Working with Media. You can do that by going to our website. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please contact me. And we greatly appreciate your time this afternoon in participating with our Partnering for Success webinar series, IT Security. Don't forget to lock the door. And until next time, thanks so much.